Hello again, folks. This is Gary Hudson of the Truth Guitar channel, and thanks for tuning in. From time to time I'll make a video and post it on my own personal YouTube channel dealing with contemporary issues, politics, religion, whatever. And today I'd like to share an interview that I had with one of my guitar customers by the name of Jim Hruska. And it's on the subject of terrorism, and I think you might find this interesting. It's my privilege today to be talking to Jim Hruska. He's one of my regular customers here at Folkstone Guitars and someone I consider a friend. He's had quite an interesting background and has agreed to let me tape an interview with him relative to his work in the military and for the federal government. Jim, glad to have you here today.
Nice to be here.
I appreciate you agreeing to this interview. From all that I've discussed with you here in the shop as you've brought me guitars to work on, I found some of the topics to be quite enlightening as far as your insights. And first of all, just a little background, if you could tell us about your background in the military.
In the military, I was an infantry officer, and in 1969 I went to Special Forces. I stayed in the active Army until 1975. I retired from the reserves in 1989. And correlation with my military service, I worked as a training specialist for terrorism counteraction at Fort McClellan. And we were the DOD agency for terrorism counteraction, and I was the civilian instructor in the program. So my special forces and my civilian job dovetailed, and here I am today.
Okay, and your work in the DOD. Now, what does the DOD stand for?
Department of Defense.
Okay.
We had the mission of securing military installations from terrorist attacks back in the 70s and 80s and 90s. Department of the Army, as you know, comes under Department of Defense. The program that we did for installation security against terrorism was a DOD program, and we had members of all the services in the program, and I was the only civilian in the program.
I see. Now, you made a statement to me that I've been thinking deeply about for many weeks. You said that the big mistake we have made here in this country is referring to the wars that we're involved in now as the war on terrorism, as using the word war. Yes. And why is that a mistake?
Well, let's go back to America in general before we do the wars on terror. We have wars on we had a war on drugs, a war on poverty, in which I was hoping to be a prisoner of, but they would never capture me. I was never in the right groups.
Right.
So we have a war on terror, war on drugs. We have wars on everything. We have war. We love to use the word war because it's easy to understand. War has a logic of its own, which I consider to be a pure logic. If you use warfare, you can be logical about it. You can set objectives, you can set goals and things of this nature. Now, terrorism, when we start talking about war on terror, we try to assume that the rules of war will apply to terrorism, and they don't. You don't have linear thinking or linear logic when it comes to terrorism. We say in the terrorism world, and especially in Department of Defense, we like to say that that you have to think like a terrorist, but it's hard to think like a terrorist. I don't believe that anybody in our culture can think like a terrorist. It's a logic that we don't accept. Now we say that it's warfare, but it isn't warfare because there's no goals that we can define. We were talking about ISIS, and let's use them as our latest example. In the 70s, we had Euro-terrorism, and that was easily defeated. We have ISIS now, and we say that we can defeat them and destroy them, and I say that you can't. I say that if you kill every person in ISIS, you will be unsuccessful in any of your in the project, because they can be easily replicated. They can find new membership. They can adopt new goals. If you destroy them, there will still be a central core of them left, and they will reignite the organization. They have safe haven in probably Qatar. They have safe haven in Saudi Arabia because they're Sunni Muslims.
Mm-hmm.
They disband, go to the safe haven, and go to their next safe haven, which can be Yemen, any of the countries. They can go to Africa. They can go to Indonesia. They can go to Central America.
Mm-hmm.
They are mobile.
And of course, they're using the internet today, and that's really helping them to continue to stay coordinated.
Yes, yes, yes. But even more important, when I was driving over here, I was thinking about the internet, and you're talking about the social media.
Mm-hmm.
But when you look at terrorist operations, why we like to call it warfare is because it mimics warfare.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that happened in Brussels today, an organization has to do intelligence gathering before they can do the operation. What I find very interesting is they don't even have to do their intelligence gathering or their reconnaissance physically. They can use Google Earth.
Mm.
You know, forget the social media. When it comes time to do the attack, they can go to Google Earth and literally do their reconnaissance.
Yep. Yep.
It defies the signature. To defeat terrorism, you have to look at the signature. On 9/11, there were signatures galore that there was an attack going to happen, to the people in power, I mean.
Mm-hmm.
But those were ignored.
Mm-hmm.
Now you can get past the signature by using the internet. And I haven't heard anybody else say that, by the way.
I think it's very interesting what you're saying. Everything about this matter of using the term war. Do the terrorists, the Muslim terrorists like ISIS, Al Qaeda, whoever, do they want us to call it war also?
Yes, I think they do.
Why is that?
Because if you call it warfare, you are legitimizing them. War is generally accepted in our Western civilization as a viable alternative. We call warfare politics. It's an extension of politics. And so if you are saying that you're at war with Al Qaeda, that would assume then that sometimes you're going to have to negotiate with them for a peace, a ceasefire, or something of that nature. We say that we don't negotiate with terrorists, but yet we do.
So the term war or warfare is in the minds and of the ISIS and Al-Qaeda, the Muslim terrorists. In their minds, it's an empowerment.
Yes,
it's like in other words, when we think in terms of when we say we are at war, that we're going to scare them. But what that actually does is it makes them say, "Yeah, that's right," right?
Yes. Take the Paris attacks.
Mm-hmm.
Immediately, the French response was, this was an act of war.
Mm-hmm. Of course.
You have just legitimized the people that did a criminal attack against your country. You have now legitimized them and say you're the president. When you say it's an act of war, you're saying that they're soldiers, that they're legitimate personnel.
They're soldiers, right?
Now,
exactly.
Let's assume that it is an act of war. If it's an act of war, when you capture them, they are prisoners of war. Then they have the rights of war. If you capture them, let's say in France or in Belgium today, if you capture them, they have to either be prisoners of war or they have to be criminals. If they're criminals, you try them in court. You have all the everything that a terrorist does is criminal in our criminal justice system in the West. They murder, they steal, they
Torture.
they kidnap. Usually they do their criminal activities to gather funds. But ISIS is different than most terrorist organizations because their operations are not to gather money. And another thing that ISIS does that's interesting is none of their operations, their terrorist operations, are they asking us to do anything. Most terrorist organizations, when they attack and take a hostage, they want you to do this, or this. ISIS never makes demands. ISIS has made no demands in France that I know of, and they have made no demands in Belgium in this attack today.
Rather
they are
interesting.
perfectly content with the violence.
So what you're saying is, using the word war is something that is actually is counterproductive in our defeating the terrorists. And you're also saying that if we kill every member of ISIS and all of the terrorists in the world, the very next day they would have up and running recruiting going on with hundreds of thousands of a whole crop of new recruits. Is that correct? Is it?
Yes.
Am I saying this right?
Yes. In military operations, when we're on the attack, we usually will stop and pace our operations, and we consolidate and reorganize. Terrorists do the same thing. If we would have a significant military advantage over ISIS in Syria and Iraq, they will simply pull in their perimeter, they will consolidate, they will reorganize, they will use that period to gain new membership, to train, and to set new goals. Then the situation will lower. Then 6 months from now, 9 months from now, you'll see they'll resurge again.
What do you think are the main? I guess we've already discussed one of these mistakes we're making, but what do you think are some of the other major mistakes that the United States is making in its so-called war on terrorism, or how we go about defeating the terrorism in the world?
Okay. I think it's interesting. Let's use your comment first of all. Defeating terrorism. When we're using a military term there to defeat them.
Fighting them?
Another term fighting too is military.
Counter-terrorism.
Yes, countering them.
Countering them.
The language that we use is very significant. You know, we talk about terror groups. We call them militias. We call them guerrillas. We call them insurgents. We call them terrorists. We use so many different terms, and we use them all interchangeably. Let's take ISIS. ISIS right now is, in my opinion, in the Levant. They are not a terrorist organization. They use terror tactics, but they have transitioned on the spectrum of warfare from terrorism to unconventional warfare, guerrilla warfare, and now they are fighting conventional battles. So, but you're asking me what's the biggest mistake that we're making? The biggest mistake that we make is that we equate the far threat to be the near threat. The advances that ISIS makes in the Levant, to me, are meaningless. The threat that we should be worried about is, can they project that power into the United States? If you want to be cold about it, the fact that they're attacking Belgium and France has no significance to us. The question is, can they come across that ocean and attack us as significantly as they're doing in Paris and France? One of the mistakes that the world is making, and this is sad to say, the open borders that Europe has clearly facilitate terrorist operations. So if you make that correlation from there to here, that means that we need to close our borders more if we're going to defend from the near threat. But wait, there's no indication that there's a great near threat. There have been no significant attacks since 9/11 here in the United States. That tells me that their organization is incapable of sending operational assets to the United States and performing such a function. I've said that from the beginning. I'll say that again. I'll say that until you threaten to shoot me. But we put all of these in a way, this attack that happened in Belgium today, I think 34 people were killed and a number were wounded. Well, the first thing that I'll go out on a limb here and say that the explosives that they used were not homemade explosives. Here in the United States, if we see a couple crazies, let's use the Boston bombings. They use homemade explosives. They're pathetic explosives. Anytime the shoe bomber, the underwear bomber, they had 84 grams of homemade petin, which was insignificant. These people in Europe, they're bringing high-grade military explosives with them across these borders that are open, in my opinion. Their weaponry. In a terrorist organization, you have to have active and passive support for them to be successful. Here in the United States, let's go back to 9/11. It's my opinion that 2 to 3 days before 9/11 happened, their active support left the United States. We should look at the flight logs. We should have looked at the flight logs of everybody that traveled on a Pakistani or Saudi Arabian passport or a Qatari passport and left this country, because those were the people that were facilitating the operation here in the United States. All terrorist organizations rely upon passive and active support. You have to have documentation, you have to have funding, you have to have transportation, you have to have safe haven.
Very interesting. I was reading on your blog the other day, and I'm going to also give the information for listeners here as far as where they can find your blog, Ranger Against War, and I'll let you give them that information here at the end. But I read a statement that I'd really like for you to comment or elaborate on some that I found very enlightening. You said, we have made the mistake of treating terrorism or the terrorist or terrorism as an entity rather than as a tactic.
Yes.
Now, I read that statement on your blog, and that really did, I thought, wow, we're treating it as now, when we treat it as an entity, well, I'll just let you explain it, just how you...
Terrorism is a tactic.
There you go.
Not only is it a tactic.
It's a tactic, right.
It's generally a poor man's tactic. And it's also generally...
But you mean like a ploy?
No. It's the only tactic that they have available to them.
But it's deliberate in order to get us to act in a certain way.
Of course.
Right?
The goal of all terrorism is to have the government to overreact.
And that's exactly what the governments do.
And that's exactly what we've done. And if there is an afterlife, it's safe to say that Osama bin Laden is laughing his little butt off right now. But we overreact. The goal of all terrorism is to have a government overreaction. When the government overreacts, then the terrorist, in classic terrorist scenarios, then the terrorists use that as their means to recruit and for the organization to grow. That's how they get their funding increased. That's how they get their membership, by government overreaction.
And treating them as an entity,
Yes.
You're referring to what now?
Well, let's go to the reality of this. Terrorism, if I understand the English language correctly, is a noun. You can't declare war on a noun. You can declare war on another nation. You cannot declare war on crime, because crime is not a warfare concept. crime is a legal concept. Terrorism is a legal concept. When the war on terror started, back in 1983, the Reagan administration, and this is the time frame that I was involved, getting involved and being involved in terrorism counteraction. The Reagan administration started to militarize the concept of terrorism. And it's so easy to do. It's so, when you talk to them, like I said, at the Department of Defense, at our course, we had Marines assigned.
Mm-hmm.
Their solution to terrorism was you kill them.
Kill them all.
You just kill them. And that's easy. But when's the last time that a Marine or any of our members of our military have shot and killed a terrorist? It doesn't happen. The closest we come are that pathetic guy on the train in France where two soldiers jumped on him and beat the bejesus out of him.
Well,
And that was purely an accident.
We've hit them from the air more than anything, I would say.
Yes.
I mean, we've hit training camps in
Yes.
Libya, for example.
We hit them from the air. We hit training camps from the air. We killed the hell out of people. So what?
As soon as we do it, there's another attack. As soon as we
Yes.
arrest one, there's another attack. Yeah.
David Petraeus said it best. He said, you cannot kill your way out of a war, and you cannot kill your way out of terrorism. Let's go back to ISIS. ISIS is not the problem in the Middle East. ISIS is the symptom of the problem. And we think that we are so enamored with violence that we think that dropping a bomb and splattering people has solved the problem. Well, it doesn't. Obviously. We're, 14 years into the war on terror? And I don't believe there's any sane person that can say that we have been successful. I coined the term phony war on terror probably 10 years ago. And now other people are using that same word, phony war on terror.
What did you think, or what did you say or think when we, of course I wasn't in your blog back then, but now I'm a subscriber to it and I read it. It's very interesting. But I was just wondering, how did you cover the invasion in Iraq and the lead up to the invasion by George W. Bush in 2002, 2003? What were you saying then?
I was saying that this was a bad idea. And
the same also for our invasion and occupation of Afghanistan.
yes, let's go back to Gulf War I. Okay. We say what a bad guy Saddam was.
Right.
All of my friends wear a Liberation of Kuwait medal. And I always have fun with them and I joke with them and I go, what is this medal? And they go, well, this is the Liberation of Kuwait. And I go, really? When's the last time they had a free election? Well, they don't have free elections in Kuwait, so obviously we didn't liberate the place. So what does it matter if Saddam Hussein runs the place or the Kuwait people run the place? It's still undemocratic rule.
Yeah, right.
So we sell the invasion of Kuwait and the first Gulf War as democracy and freedom in action, and it's not. It doesn't matter who runs those countries, and that's one of the things that we don't understand. You know, let's go back to World War I. Since we're talking about ISIS, you go back to World War I, and we fought a war to make the world safe for democracy. And what comes out of that war but a Middle East that is dominated by monarchies?
Right.
And so here we are in 2016 still fighting and supporting the monarchies in Qatar and all the rest of the places.
That was a result of the victors dividing up the land in 1918.
Yes.
And,
but so much for the war to make the world safe for democracy. Bernard Lewis, who's one of the greatest writers about the Middle East, has said that that the countries of the Middle East are nothing but tribes with flags. And I think that describes it perfectly.
That's a tribal rivalry and warfare that's going to be endless
Yes, and I also say,
until they reform, come out of the Dark Ages.
I believe they don't want to come out of the Dark Ages, in my opinion.
Well, they like, yeah, maybe
But-
they like the Dark Ages. Some people do.
Yeah, yeah. It,
Well, Islam now never had a reformation like Christianity had. Christianity was able to come out of the Dark Ages because it had a reformation, and but Islam has not. Islam is still in the Dark Ages,
it's,
and they're still. I mean, all as far as now, I know there's the so-called peaceful Muslims and so forth. While we're on this subject,
wait, let me.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Let me answer that. I prefer to leave religion out of it, but in the Western Hemisphere, in the Western society and our legal system, we believe in the individual and the glorification of the individual, always from the Magna Carta through our legal system now. Back to the tribalism. Tribalism has served them well because it helped them to survive in an extremely harsh environment. But tribalism, and the basic goal of tribalism is not individualism, and the basis of democracy is individual rights. I don't believe that people like ISIS want to be individuals. They want to be part of the clan, the tribe. And that's where their security comes from, and it has done so. Man has evolved for the last 4.1 million years, and their evolution was based, and their biological survival was based upon being a member of the group. And the group is now this Islamic group. I don't think that's going to change. You can drop bombs all day long, but that ain't going to change. You can bomb Nazi Germany into the ground, and you can win that war, but you can't. Look at Fallujah. Look at these cities that ISIS has captured. We bombed Fallujah into the ground twice. It's been bombed into the ground again. But those people are still sticking together, aren't they?
Right. Right.
I don't believe that air power is going to solve it.
So should the United States withdraw all of its forces from the Middle East and just get out? Just get out and stop legitimizing it, stop waging what we would call a war, and just get out. Is that what we should do?
Let's go back to our Civil War, okay? The goal of the United States, let's go to our revolution also. Our goal was to keep outside forces from interfering with our revolution when we were fighting the British. In our Civil War, we did everything to keep the European powers out of our internal civil war. So why don't we give the same
Yeah, one of the biggest acts we did to keep Great Britain out was the Emancipation Proclamation,
Yes,
which was a
that's
way
correct.
to, because Great Britain had their own emancipation and they were very much anti-slavery, so by signing an emancipation and making it apply only to the southern states, kept Great Britain from defending the southern states and fighting on the side of the southern states. So there was really, our goal with these two great wars that we had that formed our nation really was to keep out foreign powers and intervention, correct?
Yes, and so my point is all of the European wars in the last 2 millennia have led up to where we are now. Let them fight it out. When Joe Biden said 10, 12 years ago, divide Iraq into three separate parts. If you let them fight it out, that's probably how it would come up. That's how it would shake down.
Sunni, Shias, and Kurds?
And Kurds.
Okay.
And the problem with that is
Now we let Iran and Iraq fight it out, but of course
that was to our benefit.
yeah,
That
but
was
we
dark.
actually gave benefit. We gave chemical weapons to Saddam Hussein.
Yes.
You know.
And we fail to remember that in 1921 and 22, the Spanish, the Spanish, the French, and the English used chemical weapons against the Muslims in the Levant. We forget that we used to use chemical weapons on these people.
Yeah, but now I've got I don't have very much more time here.
Okay.
I'm trying to keep this as brief as possible. But let me just.
That's hard to do.
If you,
That's hard to
okay,
do.
there's so much to talk about. I realize, and history does affect this. So you have to go into history.
Yes.
But I want to.
Let's rephrase this. The lies of history affect this.
Yeah. Well, history's revisionism.
Yes.
That has been given to us. Now I would like for you to just answer that one basic question, though, as best as you can.
Should we leave?
Should we pull out?
I find this hard to say to people because they don't understand it. But I believe I'm pretty much of an isolationist.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we have a Monroe Doctrine in this country, and we still go by it. And we give spheres of influence. You know, being a retired soldier, my Army Echoes came in, and it's a letter, and it says, talking about Russian aggression in the Middle East and how we have to fight that. Words to that effect. And I think Russian aggression in the Middle East, we're the ones that bombed Libya, we're the ones that invaded Iraq, we're the ones that invaded Afghanistan. We started the funding and the training of the people that have started the Syrian civil war. So where's the Russian aggression? Where was the aggression in all of those instances? I don't believe that the American people, if they would look at the topic and really want to examine the topic, would be comfortable with the things that we're doing worldwide. As an example, since I'm a veteran, I'm very keyed into this. We're saying that there are 350,000 to 500,000 of our soldiers have got post-trauma stress disorder. And you have to ask yourself, why? When they go and fight these wars, they see the illegitimacy of these wars. They see that we're not. We talk about ISIS.
So it's a conscious issue.
Yes, it is. It's a moral injury, as I see it. But we see ISIS right now. Last week, our State Department said that they're committing genocide, and they probably are. But we don't mention that these Sunnis that are committing genocide have been genocided by the Shias in Iraq. The Shia government in Iraq that we put in power have been killing the Sunnis without reprieve since we left that country. So when you see what ISIS is doing, it's no surprise.
Wow.
It's a natural reaction to what the Sunnis have done to them.
Wow.
If you were a Sunni man and you lived in Fallujah, what would you do? And see, we say that ISIS is cutting off people's heads, and they do. But Jesus, the Saudi Arabians just cut off a cleric's head, and we say that they shouldn't have done that. Well, we killed a cleric when we killed al-Awlaki. When we killed his 16-year-old son and his 14-year-old nephew, we killed them. That violence is just as our violence in the region is as meaningless and unjust as the violence perpetrated by ISIS and the violence perpetrated by the Iraqi government, which we instituted.
Well, this, that's strong, but I'm afraid that a lot of people don't want to hear this. They don't want to hear the truth. They don't want to think of us as the bad guys. And I don't think you're really saying that we're the bad guys.
No, I'm saying that we're using violence that has no justifiable means, that can't be justified. For a war to be just in our society, the just war theory, the evil that comes from the war, the violence that you have to perpetrate, For example, everybody's on board with World War II. The violence that we did in World War II.
Bombing civilian cities.
Yes, it destroyed the Nazi regime. So we say that the greater good, the good outweighed the evil.
Right.
We accept that. I'm saying that all of the violence that we have used in the Middle East since 9/11 has had no military objective. It led us nowhere, and it did nothing to enhance our security.
So would you say it created ISIS?
Yes, I think that ISIS was created when General Petraeus started the Sons of Iraq, the Sons of, when he did the awakening, we paid the Sunnis not to fight us. We armed them, we trained them. I believe that the core of ISIS was the people that were dealing with David Petraeus. David Petraeus walked away with 4 stars. He walked away a hero of the war, but when he left, these people became the core of ISIS. And the people that used to be in Saddam's army, the Sunnis, are now the core of ISIS. And I also say that the people that we say are the leaders of ISIS are not, they're just the face men. The leaders of ISIS, in my opinion, would be somewhere inside of Saudi Arabia. And they will be older people, they will be older men.
The Saudis are giving them money.
Yes, yes. Elements in Saudi Arabia are giving them money.
Right.
But the people that are the adult leadership are not the people that we're saying are the leaders of ISIS. They're just the front people.
They're like commanders and
yes,
field people.
Yes, that's right. Look at this. In the war on terror, how many times have we heard that we have killed number 1 and number 2? And
happens all the time.
And has that led us to one bit of success? And the answer is no. And one of the things that bothers me about it the most is I am tired of being tagged with the moniker that I'm a naysayer. Terrorism will not be alleviated through military tactics. It's that simple.
Very well put. Would you give us some information now about your blog, Ranger Against War, where we can find that and subscribe and read?
It's one word, Ranger Against War, at Blogger.
At Blogger.
And that's it. But I've been writing so long now, I've written 3,400 articles on this topic.
Wow.
And other topics also. But if you plug in just Ranger Against War on Google, you'll get enough hits to find me.
Right.
And if any of your people do come and read Ranger, I have a thing up on the right, my favorites.
Okay.
I write a lot about the war on terror. I've written articles about all of the medals of honor, all of the major battles. I'm proud of my military analyses that I do on the war on terror. And
look forward to seeing that.
And I have to caution the reader that although I criticize the military action, I am not being derogatory to our soldiers. Our soldiers fight with distinction, they fight with bravery. And I'm glad that I didn't have to fight in that type of war. And we're getting back to the suicide rate and the PTSD rate. I think our soldiers are intelligent enough to know that it's all been a big lie. And that's where the moral injury comes from. They know that it isn't correct, and they know it's not helping our country, the things that we've been doing.
Well, Jim, I really appreciate this interview, and I'm going to certainly be sending you the link, and you'll have it as well. It's going to be published just on my personal YouTube channel, and I'm going to recommend it. And Been very, very insightful. I've learned a lot sitting here talking to you. I'm looking forward to
Can I
reading
do
the
the
blog.
closing statement?
You sure can. Go right ahead.
I believe in America first. And if you look at that, those were the Republicans before World War II. If you look at America, I love to drive America. Look at our towns. Look at the centers of all of our towns. They're corrupt. You go to my hometown, Cleveland, 1 out of every 3 houses is abandoned, torn down, or boarded up. You go to all the Rust Belt. Flint, Michigan has lead in their water. Well, that's no big deal because 1,000 other city water supplies have lead in it. My hometown of Cleveland, Ohio has twice the lead level that Flint, Michigan has. Okay, look at the infrastructure.
Goodness.
Look at our roads. 46 million Americans go to bed hungry at nighttime. I'm from Ohio, and I stand in Maumee, Ohio when I go to visit my old university in Bowling Green. They have silos that are so huge, and they're just miles and miles. This country, you drive from Tennessee to Ohio, and there's nothing but food growing everywhere. Now, how in the hell can people be hungry in a country that's so plentiful? How can terrorism defeat a country that feeds the world and the terrorists can't even feed themselves? That's our strength. It's not a military strength. Our strength is the fact that we can feed the world. We can feed our people. None of the people that fight us can say that.
Very good. Very good.
That's it.
All right. Thank you, Jim. Thank you. All right.